Welcome to Coffee with Kelly.
I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. In today's episode, we tackle the challenges of school safety and provide practical solutions. We discuss overcoming obstacles like funding, time constraints, expertise gaps, and the frequency of changes. Additionally, we explore the importance of creating a school safety and security strategic plan to enhance safety in schools. Join us as we guide you through the steps of building a comprehensive safety framework for a safer future for your school. Well, good afternoon, Kelly.
Good afternoon.
Usually I say good morning, but we're in the afternoon this time.
We are. We can still have coffee. In fact, I have coffee with me right now.
I'm always drinking coffee. Stay caffeinated, my friends.
Right.
But also stay hydrated.
Hydrated. I'm actually horrible with hydration.
Yeah. Don't be like us. Drink water.
Right.
So, Kelly, today we're going to be talking about probably a well thought of topic that's probably each person within K-12 experiences all the time, which is obstacles and challenges and how to navigate them.
Yep. Let's talk about those.
Let's do it.
Most often asked questions is, how do I overcome this problem? Or not even, how do I overcome it? We can't. I have this problem. Okay, let's accept that as a challenge and a problem that we need to solve.
I think that's pretty important. It's to look at an obstacle and try to, look at it and say, all right, how am I going to solve this? Not, I've experienced this. Okay, I give up. And that's that whole mindset. Just once you get past that, then you can get to the next step that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you, you can change your paradigm very quickly by doing this. If you don't use obstacles as an excuse not to do something, but turn that around and say, okay, how do I get this done? Even though there's an obstacle there, let's say funding, let's say administration, let's say lack of experience. How do I do this? How do I get this going? How do I navigate this obstacle? How do I reduce the number of challenges that I see? And we talked about this early on about having that mindset of, okay, how do I get this done? How do I figure this out? Problem solving, and working through those obstacles, and how that's part of the learning process that you need to go through to increase your knowledge and experience. You learn most from your failures and meeting and navigating those challenges.
I definitely agree. I've definitely had anytime I've learned a lot, it's because I failed at some point.
Right? I think it was Edison who said, for every success I had more than 10,000 failures.
Yep.
I think we've lost the art of problem solving and navigating obstacles, and have relied a lot on identifying obstacles as a reason not to move forward.
You think that's a generational thing?
I don't know. I see it a lot. I've seen it a lot in people in my generation, and you can see those people very quickly because it's so much easier to just say, oh, we can't do this because.
Yeah.
And as opposed to trying to find the answer, like, we need to do this. There is an obstacle. How do we figure ourselves around that? And I've seen it time and time again where good emergency managers are those who are able to work through problems very quickly. And, problem solving, conflict resolution are critical life skills that people need. And we need to make sure that people are taught those. In fact, it's such a critical skill for many people. As I said in the blog, the United Kingdom, England, Britain, whatever you want to call it, they teach problem solving from day one at their academy. And they infuse problem solving in everything that it is that they do. And they call it spinning the wheel, because when we talk early on about what emergency management is, it is nothing more than having the ability to solve problems. The only difference between solving problems on an everyday routine basis and an emergency is the volume and how rapidly they come at you. The process is still the same. Looking at the material, looking at the information and the data you have, and making a decision and going with that. Then looking at how well that implementation went and making the necessary adjustments. And I've seen people who have degrees in and are certified emergency managers that fail miserably, because even though they're well educated in emergency management, they're horrible problem solvers. They can tell you which form to fill out and who you need to talk to, but they have a very difficult time solving problems. And then conversely, you take somebody who doesn't have that kind of education and certification at the end of their title, that are good problem solvers, and they are phenomenal at solving these problems and working through all of these issues. And it's a skill we can teach.
I feel like you missed a really good model in this section. You totally could have brought up MacGyver. You ever watch
MacGyver?
You ever watch that show?
Oh yeah.
That was my favorite show growing up as a kid, and it reminds me, because he would always come into these situations where it's like, how do you get out of that? And he would just look at it and figure out a way out of it, just using random stuff. So he is a prime example of being a good problem solver.
Resourceful, yep. Right? He looked at what he has around him, and can I attack this problem? Can I navigate this obstacle maybe differently?
Yep. Come
at it and solve it using what I have available to me, not necessarily, I don't have the right tractor for this, right? Mm-hmm. Or the right tool. Can I do something else and accomplish maybe not exactly the same thing, but close enough that it'll work for the situation that we have in front of us?
I think it was really important that you brought up that the example of how, you have someone who's maybe not as experienced, but they, performed at a very high level just because of how they work through the problem.
I've experienced that so many times, especially in the emergency management phase of my career. And, I was lucky in that most of my career centered around specialized law enforcement. I wasn't really keen on the patrol function. I liked it. I mean, it was good. It was fun while it lasted. But out of my 34 years in law enforcement, only about 6 of them were actually spent on patrol. So everything else was in some sort of specialized law enforcement. But being in those positions, as much as I was, it allowed me to look at what I had in front of me and solve the problems that were in front of me with what I had in front of me. And I've seen some people who dedicated themselves to the patrol function, which is kind of the same thing. It's different every day, but the processes are the same. And it becomes very easy to them, and they lose sight of the ability to really solve unique problems on a regular basis. And, I've seen some very high functioning SWAT people who, when you give them a complex problem, they kind of look at it and it's not in their tactical range. So it's difficult for them to see what what the solution is. Fire guys are fun with that as well. Everything's structured for the fire service. And sometimes we have to remove the structure to get things done. And it can be very anxiety inducing when you pull somebody out of their comfort zone, especially during an emergency.
All right. So I think I'm just going to start tackling probably what I think is probably the top obstacle that schools face. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but it's probably funding, right? That whenever the obstacle they face always probably there's some aspect of it that's funding.
So if you asked 1,000 school district, what is the biggest issue with their school safety program? What do you think they're going to say?
They're probably going to say they just don't have the resources. Also, just the money. That's probably what they mean.
Funding, right? The fact of the matter is, it's the desire to do it, put in the effort. That's the biggest obstacle, right? If I can find money in many, many places, it's hard to find the effort.
So in a school, who is responsible for finding or researching how to get money for the school?
Different people within the different school districts. Some of it's based upon size and manpower. Okay. But typically it falls upon the business managers. They, again, depending on the size of the district, they might have people who look just for grants and write their grants and do that kind of stuff. Look for donations, corporate sponsorships, things like that, right?
Yep. Okay.
They might have somebody. Oftentimes, like when I was looking for money, because I generally didn't have a budget, I went to my boss, convinced her that we needed it, and then she found the money. And now she might have gone to the business office and said, hey, I need $20,000 or $50,000 or whatever. And they said, okay, we can do this, this, and that. Right. And oftentimes when I was looking for money, it wasn't initially there. And what we had to do was spread it out over a couple of years, because what I was asking for was not attainable under the current budgeting process. So I had to say, okay, I need $500,000 to outfit all of these schools with cameras, let's say. And they said, well, you're not going to get 500, but this year I can give you 40. And then let's start budgeting for incrementally achieving what you're asking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, take what you can get. Basically, if you can't get the whole thing,
right.
Don't give up and say, all right, well, if you don't do that, give me a part of it, and then I can build upon it the next year. Something is better than nothing, especially when it comes to, security cameras and things like that.
Safety things, right? Yeah, let's start building it. It's no different than building your knowledge and experience base that we've talked about. Building your security systems is an issue, and you have to do that as time goes on. You can't just walk in and say, okay, sit down for this hour class and now you're a safety expert. You need time. Incrementally, you need to build your experience, and working through these obstacles is part of that, right? And budgeting and trying to figure out how you can get into the budgeting cycle and what the entry point is and what the budget gurus are going to be willing to tolerate is part of that learning process.
So the next one that we have written down here as an obstacle is, and you've probably guessed it, is time. So this has got to be number 2, right? And we can there's only so much time in a day. Like we can't add more time. So how do we navigate a set obstacle?
So when you say set, there's 24 hours
Yep.
in a day, right?
Yep.
We have these arbitrary start and stop times for when you're supposed to be at work and when you can leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are all barriers. Then we have the workload that is present that we need to accommodate. And we know that the schools fill up those work hours pretty well. This is where we look at the time budgeting, scheduling process and how we need to get the safety processes, training, drills, exercises, how we need to elevate their priority so that they can be infused into our daily activities to build that safety culture that we've talked about so frequently. But if somebody has already occupied the time and space that you need to do something, it's going to be very difficult to knock them off or out of that time slot, right? So when we start looking at putting our plans together for not only next year, but the year after, we have to start looking at education of those decision makers who make the decision on how to disperse and budget their time. And we need to start eyeing the fact that safety is a priority and you need to allow time for us to do that. And this comes into the effort that we talked about earlier and putting in the effort to actually get the time that you need, get the experience and training that you need. And when you start working towards your scheduling for all things that are going to occur in the next school year, you need to be part of that conversation. Drills need to be accounted for, exercises, initial training, refresher training, and remedial training all need to be accounted for. Policies need to be written. Those policies have to have some sort of teeth in them to not only allow, but mandate people to go to training.
And here you're not asking that, to add more time onto your work day and work overtime and work yourself, too much. It's a matter of looking at priorities and saying, all right, this needs to fit in here somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And maybe I need to take some professional development time away from somebody. Maybe I need to hire a substitute teacher for one of my staff members who needs some remedial training.
That's an interesting idea.
Maybe I need to be able to, during a teacher in service day, there's several of them throughout the year, maybe I need to go from school to school or have 2 or 3 schools come to a safety training day that day instead of doing what it is that they do during those days.
So let's move on to probably my favorite one is the no expertise, experience, or the phrase "not my job" obstacle.
Yeah, this is a fun one, right? We understand this.
Yep.
We understand that you're not a safety expert. We understand that you have limited expertise. We also understand that you believe that it's not part of your job. And we've talked about this time and time again. 24 years past Columbine. Anyone who is in the education system today who says it's not my job is likely in the wrong profession, coming from Kelly Moore. That's my opinion, because it is very obvious that we have a legal and moral obligation to protect our kids. What that means today is different than 24 years ago. Because of the incident that happened 24 years ago, we have evolving into where all of our people within the school district, doesn't matter what title they have, are responsible. And we've said this over and over again. It's a shared responsibility, not shared only if you think you need to do it, but shared by everybody. And not having the expertise or the experience, again, I think we talked about this a little bit on the last blog or last podcast, was one of the things that I have a hard time processing is when I get teachers saying, this isn't my job. I don't have the experience. I don't have this. This is not something that I should be doing. And I looked to them and said, you have kids, don't you? Who's protecting your kids? Your children, not your students, your children. One of their colleagues is, and you are likely protecting the children of one of your colleague, one or more, right? Oftentimes, our children come to the same school that we're teaching at.
Oh yeah.
And so you're telling me essentially, this isn't my job, that I don't have the experience, the expertise to do this. Well, whose responsibility is it to protect your children? Yours. And if you don't have them with you, don't you want somebody else to have the experience, the knowledge, the expertise, and an attitude that is, this is my job. I should be protecting these kids like they were my own, because in many cases, legally they are while they're under your care. So this one gets me all of the time.
Yep. It reminds me locally here, when you're driving around through a couple neighborhoods, you'll see signs that say, drive like your kids live here. So it's basically the same thing, you know, act as if this is your neighborhood and your kid is running across the street. Don't drive like an idiot. So yeah, same concept.
Right. And we always have we talked about this many times. Ultimately, who's responsible for your safety?
Yep.
You are, right? And we get into this conversation about it takes a village to raise a child. And what's that mean? It's a shared responsibility. It means that we're all here to raise this child the way that we as a community believe they should be raised to become productive members of society, looking out for each other, helping those who are in need. That's all part of it. I kind of think safety at school is part of that village.
Oh yeah.
I think that it takes an entire village, which in fact, we can all identify as the schools within our communities as one of the primary focus centers of our communities. It takes all of us. And to say that, you know, I don't want to help you raise your kids. I'm part of this village, but I don't want to do that. That's not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We're looking for people who want to do this, who feel that need, that urge to protect their children, even if that's not biologically their child.
Man, I'm getting kind of like amped up. If this isn't amping you up, then find something that will. Like,
right?
My goodness. Tell you, I think this is my favorite time to have conversations with you. It's just talking about like the safety of children. I feel like you get so like fired up, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah, it's not rocket science.
Nope.
And sometimes it just frustrates me a little bit. I'm very passionate about this, and I've become more and more passionate about it as, especially in the last 5 years when I've been dealing specifically with school safety and understanding what we need and what's lacking, and really kind of how simple this process is, but people make it much more difficult, or they find excuses not to get involved with the process.
So we've been kind of talking about the obstacle of, maybe not knowing everything and not being an expert. So let's transition that to the obstacles that we run into when we have confusion from experts. What are we talking about here?
So I always give this advice. If you don't know something, you don't understand something, you need help to navigate the obstacle before you, you need some help. You need to get the input from experts, right? People who know what they're talking about and how to navigate.
Yep.
The issue comes in with, and I think you and I have talked about this, maybe not in a podcast, but have talked about this before, is oftentimes there's a contradiction, there's confusion between the experts, and that in turn confuses people, the ones who are seeking our help. So when we look at the experts, and I'm going to use air quotes there, the experts, there really is no certifying agency. There's no minimum standard that I have to meet. I can self-declare myself as a school safety expert. And as long as I am keeping you engaged in you are seeking only my opinion and my advice, then you will continue to seek me out as that expert because I'll make it sound like it's legitimate, right? The problem is if you really want to learn about safety knowledge experience and really build your knowledge base, which you should seek out multiple experts. And we've talked about when I say something, I'm coming at it with my years of experience and knowledge and the type of experience that I have. And there's going to be lots of people who will say, Kelly, you're wrong. That's not the way you do it. That's just not the way you do it. And we could have that conversation. If you're asking Kelly and some other expert separately, I'm going to say, nope, this is the way we do it. And that other expert say, no, he's wrong. This is the way we do it. That's why I always ask people to talk to their local first responders and get consensus from them on how they are going to do it, right? And, I have this question and these obstacles identified fairly frequently. Is one of the reasons we're not further along than we are is because the experts can't agree, right? And it's confusing, and I get it. But if we shift our mindset to something other than saying, well, that's not what this guy said. What are we supposed to be doing? You say this, and the other guy that we had said this. Which is right? And my response to that is, we're both right, given the set of circumstances that we are talking about. And it's not that Kelly was wrong and Steve was right. It's that he does it differently because we have, especially in the emergency management problem solving, we have different ways of coming to the same point, coming to the same answer. And how do we keep our kids safe? We make sure that they don't get injured or killed, right? There's many ways for us to do that. And I might believe in my experience that this is the best way. Somebody else might believe that that is the best way. And so what we're really doing is it's not mutually exclusive. It is more inclusive where we look at, under this circumstances, I could use this. Under this other circumstance, I would use that one, right? And I'll give you an example. The prescribed response from the Department of Homeland Security for an active shooter is run, hide, fight.
Yep.
Most of us have heard that. If you talk to somebody from a federal agency, they're going to say, likely, if you ask the question, what should I do in response to an active shooter? They're going to say, run, hide, fight. Because this is the logic. What is the best place to be during an active shooter event?
As far away as possible.
Somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? So if you can, you should get away from where that's occurring.
Yep.
How do you do that? You run. If you can't, then you should hide so that person can't see you. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Can't have access to where you are. However, if that person should stumble upon or find you and breach your hiding spot, you have one choice left. What is that?
Fight with everything you got.
Fight your way out of it. Yep. So what are our responses? Run, hide, fight. The problem is that's not a very good structure to respond to an active shooter in a school setting, because you can't take an emergency protective order or action, emergency protective action that doesn't allow you to execute that action unless you have all of those people that you're supposed to be taking care of with you. So what's the first response? Let's run. You can't run with 30 kindergartners.
No.
You just can't. So what's your next option? Lockdown. Lockdown is hiding.
Yep.
As I Love You Guys says, it's locks, lights, out of sight. Hiding. Lock your doors, turn off all of the lights, hide out of view so they can't see you. And that's what hide is. Running is an evacuation, moving from one area to another. And fighting is a protective action that is required should they breach your lockdown spot, right? That being said, in a school setting, there is empirical data available through, I think it's Syracuse University or someplace. It's a school system in Syracuse that they've done studies on this, and there's actual data that says you are much more likely to survive an active shooter in a school setting if you are behind locked doors than if you run. That's what the federal government says is your standard. But I just contradicted it. And I explained to you why I contradicted it. Because we have to look at that. Is that an option? Absolutely. Should you understand those options? Yes. There are times in a school setting, even though Kelly said you should be behind a locked door, that those locked doors are preventing you access. So now what is your option? Run or fight. That's where we get into really understanding the basics of fundamentally what we're supposed to do. What are our options available to us? And if we get conflicting or contradictory information that's confusing to us, then we just look at it and we break that down fundamentally. What does that mean to me? And what parts can I use to save me during which situations? And now the contradiction turns into just another tool on the tool belt, another option for me. It's no longer confusing. It's just another option.
And that brings us to our last point that we'll talk about real briefly. And really, it's kind of what we've been touching on already. And it's kind of just about just learning as you go and just building upon everything you're learning and adding to it, and not trying to just take on something as a whole. And so this challenge is about changes that occur too often. And as you've mentioned in your blog here, in the same sense that we're not teaching students something really advanced right off the bat and expecting them to just be able to navigate it well, just like in a curriculum, we're doing things bit by bit. And at the end, they get tested on the whole. So it's the same concept.
Yeah, in fact, our entire academic career is built upon this concept,
Yep.
right? We start at kindergarten, learn the ABCs. We go through elementary school in fact, it's called primary school in a lot of areas, right? Because it's the primary knowledge you need. You need to know how to read. You need to know how to write. You need to understand the basics of mathematics, which Ethan failed to comprehend, but he's getting better. But then we go into middle school and we start adding not necessarily significantly more complex stuff, but we increase the volume and the variety, right? You go into middle school and oftentimes you're taking the next step, but you have 4, 5, 6 different periods where you're getting all this information from different people on different topics. And then high school, you're expected to continue with that. And then college, where you get an AA degree, a BA degree, a master's degree, a doctorate, certifications in certain things. So everything is incremental. We shouldn't look at gaining the experience of any other required task, expertise, or experience any other way. We don't walk into kindergarten and say, you now have to solve these doctorate level problems. We give you the fundamentals, and that takes, based upon development, that takes time to master. But once you do that, then you can start applying those fundamentals to every problem that comes at you. And when we talk about change and how fast and how often, that's not just in school safety, but it's also in the systems that are in place to help you manage school safety, help you alert, help you with early warning, detection, and so forth. Technology is moving at a very rapid pace. We'll talk a little bit more in the second half of this. But understanding what we're trying to accomplish and taking the most recent incident and asking ourselves, how would I have handled that differently or at all? If how comfortable am I with my students and staff, faculty, with handling that problem? And if your answer is anything less than ideal, then you need to work on that. But we're not telling you to do that overnight. We're trying to, the people I'm typically talking to here are educators. They know how to teach this. They know how to learn this. And we understand that the fundamental education, even the college and doctoral systems that existed in the 1920s, are completely different than they are today. That didn't happen overnight. But yet, we still understand, we've learned the fundamentals, and we know how to apply them. And we can apply them very rapidly if we understand the problems and how to solve them, the obstacles and how to solve those and navigate those. Change is often good. It's often for the better. But if we don't evolve with the change, it's going to bite us. I'm as old school as they get, but I have to change all of the time. I'm learning things all of the time. I've dedicated at least the second part of my life to being a student of school safety. So I look at all of those things and I look at how do I convey lessons learned to solve the problem, not just a problem. So embrace the change. As the Navy SEALs like to say, embrace the suck. As soon as you say, I'm going to embrace the change or quote the suck in this, I'm going to embrace it, then your mindset changes. You can really start growing inside and you can start evolving and changing very quickly because you're looking at this as a good challenge, not a negative challenge.
And then we get to look towards the future being the next school year. And
Yep.
We're going to look at 4 processes that will need attention. And these processes are school safety and security assessment and gap analysis, school safety plans, emergency operations plans, which we've definitely talked about before in the past, and school safety and security strategic plans.
Yeah. We've talked about most of these before, but let me set the stage of where we're at, right? So we're at the end of June, and the last podcast and blogs within the series really dealt with closing up the 22-23 school year and looking forward to the 23-24 school year. So we reviewed all of our processes, took all of the suggestions and recommendations for improvement, and started working through those and getting those implemented and designing the training and implementation for all of these new changes that are coming at us, right? So before school starts and for the 23-24 school year. But what we're really talking about right now in this part of the podcast is starting to work on the 24-25 school year. So really looking at our safety assessments, our security assessments, often one and the same. Some people separate those out. Safety is really your safety program, and then your security are the facilities, the assets that protect you physically. Safety are those systems and trainings and certifications that help people protect you. So that's our people side, essentially. Doing that gap analysis. And what we're talking about is we should have an idea of what our overall safety program should look like, or what we want it to look like. What systems are we going to have in place? If money was not an object and we could do whatever we wanted, what would that look like? And sort of map that out. Now, every year you should be, even though most states don't mandate this on a yearly basis, some 2-3 years, some every year, but some not at all. But you really should be doing an assessment to figure out what you have and what you have, is it working, and what you don't have. I've been asked this question a couple of times. So I go through and I mark what I have and whether or not it's working appropriately. Yes. Okay, I can do that. Wait. You need to also make sure you mark those things that you want that you don't have.
Yep.
You need to account for those, because you're looking to see what you've accomplished in the past year and whether or not that's still working as designed. And hopefully, if you had the proper planning and reports to your district leadership, they've agreed to your plan, your strategic plan over the 3, 5, 10-year periods, and they've allowed you to design a plan that was attainable for them. So what you're trying to do is mark off incrementally what you have and what you still need. And as we look through building that kind of plan for the future, communications with your district leadership, the school board, is critical, because you don't want to come in with this beautiful plan and they have no idea what's going on. So include them in that process. But we're really looking at, what do I need to start advocating for and put into place? What are my expectations to be put in place for the 24-25 school year? Understanding this as a caveat, oftentimes during the school year, and we just talked about the change is coming at people so quickly, so often, and sometimes in great volume. But those are often incident driven. So these new mandates that are changing the way we do things are oftentimes they're set for to be required to be implemented within a certain period of time or by a certain date. Some, depending on how emergent something seems to be, then you might have to implement it immediately. So something that you were originally planning for the 24-25 school year, the politicians may have just said, well, yeah, thank you for planning, but you need to have that implemented next month. So you need to shift your focus to getting that done. The beauty of that is if you're doing the planning properly, that's easy to pivot. If you have not even thought of that, or you're not planning for whatever that new mandate is, then you're going to have to start from scratch. And with a quick mandate, that can be overwhelming and become overwhelming very quickly. And when we look at the ability to plan and look at things that we don't currently have, look to other schools and what they're doing, look to other states and what those mandates are. Because even though they're not mandated in your state, they were mandated because of a reason. And look at the intent of the mandate, not necessarily the actual mandate itself, but the intent of that mandate. What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to accomplish here? And can we do that quickly? And if not, can we do it inexpensively? If not, how are we going to budget for this? Where are we going to find those funds for? And how do we start working at that right now? That's part of that strategic plan and looking towards what your end goal is.
It's a great point to utilize what's going on around you, let's say, within the United States, and to see, what other schools are doing. So it helps you kind of anticipate, like, hey, this might be coming down the pipeline. Like, this could be a mandate in your state as well. So
yeah, I'll give you a perfect example. Alyssa's Law.
Oh yeah, yep, it's a big one,
right? Alyssa's Law is the panic button law enacted in Florida and New Jersey after Parkland, named after one of the victims there. And the intent of that is to have a mechanism that I can, during an incident, I can press a button and it will get the help I need as quickly as possible, right? You don't need a mandate for that. Yet people are waiting for the mandate. We know that we want you as practitioners of school safety. We want you to look through having the ability to press a button to get the help you need, the panic button. Why are we waiting for Alyssa's Law to come to a legislature near you? That's something you can do now, and you should be doing.
It's a great part of the response part of emergency management.
Yes.
Because even though that we're trying to work towards the preventative measures so that we don't have to hopefully utilize the parts of the response as much, it's still a vital part.
This blog lays out a lot of or a couple of the plans and processes you need to go through to plan for your future, for the upcoming years. We've talked about most of them. We talked about security and safety site assessments. We've talked about the school safety plans quite a bit. We've talked about the emergency operations plans quite a bit. We've kind of touched on the strategic plans, but not really in the depth that we needed to go. And I want to spend a little bit of time here on that. We don't really need to go back over the other ones that much, but the strategic plans are what are going to set you up for success in the future. And now's the time to really start looking at your obstacles and your challenges and figuring out how you are going to navigate those. The strategic plan allows you to do that. First, you will identify your challenges. We talked about this at the beginning, that funding is always going to be an issue. But if you identify those obstacles and in your strategic plans, you say, I want to accomplish X, but it's going to cost us Y. I now have identified my want, the cost, and now I have to figure out how I'm going to fund that. And working through those challenges and putting them into the plan. And then once you say, okay, I need 100 security cameras that are going to cost me $150,000, and I've identified a grant that will buy those for us, you've just eliminated a budgeting excuse later down the road. Or you can say, I need $50,000 a year worth cameras to accomplish my $150,000 goal for purchasing this 100 cameras. Then I can spread that over 3 years. So now you're starting to navigate the obstacles and you're presenting them in a plan that can be scrutinized, can be adjusted, can be monitored, and approved. So once it's approved and everyone's on the same sheet of music, then it's easy to go back to council members, report on the progress, and say, okay, in the next 6 months, you're going to have a $50,000 bill coming up for these cameras that you approved during the summer. And also, we mentioned this earlier, is part of your plan. If it becomes a mandate, it's much easier to pivot if it's already part of something that you were planning for and trying to account for.
Yep. For sure.
Of these documents that we just read off, this is by far while it's going to be initially a pretty heavy workload, once you get it going, it'll be the document that saves your life, really.
Maybe literally.
And maybe literally. Yeah.
And the little added point that you have here that's kind of attached to this, since you're talking about technology, that I kind of just wanted to mention is that, as you're looking to improve your safety in your school and you're looking to add technology, keep in mind that, we have a certain amount of technology now, but in 5 years, that's going to change drastically. So I feel like a part of your strategic plan needs to have some flexibility in knowing that, your security cameras are probably going to have way more abilities in the next 5 years, especially with AI.
Yep. So again, I'm not a technology person. I'm becoming one, because in the technology industry, we see the future, what's coming. People have been working on AI for many years, and we've seen some evidence of that without even realizing it's evidence. Like when you're typing a document in Google or Word or what have you, it tries to anticipate what you're going to say next, and it gives you an option, right? And it thinks, so all you have to do is hit the tab button and it goes, if that's what you're looking for. Oftentimes, that's exactly what you're looking for. Maybe not always, but oftentimes. That's sort of the ground floor of this AI phenomena that is coming. But I get asked, being the safety expert, I get asked, how is AI going to affect what we do? How is it going to be used? And so now I have to start really working through that. And I will tell you that if you are looking 5 years down the road as to what technology is going to look like, good for you. But that technology in 5 years is going to look nothing like what we're doing today. And it's not a 5-year period where we have to wait. You can see how quickly AI is evolving, and it's almost weekly there's something different.
Oh,
yeah. And we have to embrace it. It's there. Technology is good, especially when it works for us. But where we're really looking in the future is, how do we develop technology that can make you an expert instantly, so that we can take that learning curve out of it, because that's a big obstacle for us, right?
Oh yeah.
So let's figure something out. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know, but that's one of the problems. That how do we do this? How do we develop systems that can make decision making better, quicker, and more accurate? So hang on. Technology's going.
Hang on.
It's coming, and it's coming fast. Yeah, hang on. Because in all reality, our schools have a lot of technology in those walls, but they're focused on helping students learn. And the technology that they're using is kind of old school already.
And they probably just implemented it, a couple of years ago?
If
Yeah.
that. Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it is, technology's you should look to technology for solutions, and just make sure that they work for you. If you can't find it this week, check next week. Keep looking, because there's going to be a solution out there. And that's one of the beauties for Crisis Go, is we pride ourselves with innovation, and we continually look for solutions that are beneficial to our schools, our customers, those who are serious about school safety. And look next week. If it's not there next week, wait a week. If it's not there that week, give us a call and let us know what you're looking for. It may literally be just a misunderstanding of what you currently have, or we have something that we can easily adjust or alter slightly to meet your needs. Because technology, managing all of your systems and processes, it's almost impossible to do it accurately and effectively without some way technology is managing that for you.
Well, that's all for this episode. Remember, embracing these challenges head on is crucial for creating a safer school environment. Let's remember the significance of developing a school safety and security strategic plan as a roadmap to enhance safety in the long run. We hope the insights and practical tips shared in this episode empower you to take action and build a secure future for our children. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, please leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more episodes on ensuring school safety.